Welcome back, nonprofit friends. I'm Tosha Anderson. I'm the host of a modern nonprofit podcast. This is a space where I bring together thought leaders in different spaces with different expertise and share kind of tips, tricks, or hacks for how we continue operating within this nonprofit world. And occasionally I bring on, experts within particular areas, but sometimes I have a really cool opportunity to highlight actual leaders of actual nonprofit organizations. And that's what we're going to do today. Karen Leies, you have been so generous with your time and willing to come on and have a conversation about teamwork and integrity and nonprofit leadership. And I like having these conversations because hopefully we give some insights and some tips and tricks for nonprofit leaders struggling in the same way that we all are, just trying to do this amazing work. But I often say, even if I don't answer all of your problems, maybe at least we give a little validation along the way, right? You are not in this alone. So, Karen, you are the president and chief executive officer of an organization called the Seeing Eye. And like I said, I want to first say thank you for coming on board. And thanks for sharing your tips and tricks and hacks on leadership and any insights you might have as it relates to teamwork and integrity. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tasha. Thanks for having me.
So let's just ground real quick because I think people like to know the context. Tell us a little bit about the Seeing Eye, your organization, maybe kind of your size and how you briefly ended up in this leadership role.
Sure, sure. Well, I just have to start by saying it's such an honor and a privilege to be the CEO. Every time someone introduces me that way, I get a little shiver because it is really
Yeah.
such a privilege. We are a 96-year-old organization. We are the world's oldest guide dog school. And we were started in 1929. Our mission is to breed, raise, train the highest quality of guide dogs and then match them with their people to allow for independence and dignity in travel. So that work has been honed and refined over decades and to the point where we have over a 95% match rate and success rate for, we call them teams or partnerships when we match
Mhm.
the dog and their human. When they go back into their community after 3 years, we have 95% success rate. So we're really, really honored and privileged to bring independence and dignity to blind and low vision individuals
Mhm.
and honor and respects the pups and the dog's role in that essential process.
Yeah. Well, Karen, I mentioned this before I started hitting recording, but a little known fact to me, maybe not if you follow along my LinkedIn, I'm a huge dog fan. My daughter would sometimes say that our golden retriever is our favorite child. And I don't know, maybe sometimes I don't disagree. She's 10 going on 20, so he's easier sometimes, right? So
We all
I
get
love I love the work that you all are doing. And I'm sure that comes with its own set of challenges. I thought about this topic, talking about strong leadership. Whenever we kind of came up with this concept of this podcast episode. And the charity CFO has kind of worked, me specifically, has worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of nonprofit organizations over the time. And I don't know if you know this, but we have this concept of called like a blueprint of the charity CFO financial blueprint. And essentially, it's like a 30-point principle of all of the common threads that we see the most successful and sustainable organizations have in common. And it's interesting, you mentioned your organization was, how did you say 96 years old? Did I get that right?
Yes. And we're
96.
33 million annual budget and
Wow. Yeah.
180 full-time staff.
It's interesting because the number one thing that we see that the most successful organizations have in common is exactly what we're talking about today, and it's strong leadership. And I think you can define that in a bunch of different ways. So I wanted to just kind of preface it by saying this, and this is why I'm so excited about this conversation. And I think the more often we can talk about strong leadership in nonprofits, the better we can just share this tips and words of wisdom and continue to strengthen the entire nonprofit community so that hopefully every organization is $33 million, 96 years in. That's an incredible feat. So
And
congratulations first and
continuing to
foremost.
evolve every day, right? I think
I
that
mean,
innovation and forward vision is really important, but we'll get to that too. Yeah.
so I'm curious, like, let's kind of start from the very beginning because I think strong leadership is such a broad word, right? What do you prioritize most in leadership?
Hmm.
Start there.
Well, honestly, it's the people, right?
Okay.
It's the people who I work with, and it's the people we serve. I think when I think about the attributes and the characteristics that matter most to me in my leadership style and that have influenced me in becoming the leader that I am, I think about being purpose driven, being empathetic, and being innovative, innovation. And I know those words mean different things to different people, so I
Yeah.
just want to let me tell you a little bit what I mean by those three words. But purpose is mission, right? We could
Hmm.
all, this is the nonprofit podcast. We could all
Right.
choose to spend our time in our life doing a lot of different things, but the people that work at this organization, at the Seeing Eye, are so incredibly mission driven and committed to the people that we serve and that mission that I just articulated to you.
Hmm.
So that's the type of culture that I, as a leader, want to foster and encourage and continue to build by the people that come in and work here.
Hmm.
Can't do anything with you if you don't aren't surrounded by like-minded individuals and like-minded, purpose-driven colleagues.
Yeah.
So that's really important to me. Empathy. Uh, this is my first year in this role, so I am still developing my relationships with individuals, with stakeholders, volunteers. We have over 500 volunteers at the Seeing Eye that raise our puppies for us each year and their families. And I'm going out and meeting each and every one of those volunteers through the puppy clubs and getting to know them and trying to understand what matters to my staff, what matters to our volunteers and to our donors,
Hmm.
to our board. Uh, all the different stakeholders, and being empathetic, being a listener, caring what they care about, making sure that I can be optimistic and be thoughtful in the face of challenges or in the face of constructive criticism or criticisms that they may have. So
Yeah.
empathy is a huge driver for me. I think it is with a lot of female CEOs. I know I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts and you were talking about empathetic leadership, but
Hmm.
it's very important, especially with our community here at the Seeing Eye, looking at the pups and their service and looking at the people we serve and their needs, to have that empathetic style. And then innovation.
Hmm.
Oftentimes people hear the Seeing Eye and that we're 96 years old and it's very, historic and established, but that doesn't mean that we're not wanting to look forward to see how we continue to evolve and change. What does the next 5 years bring?
Yeah.
What is the future of the Seeing Eye really as we approach our centennial in the next 100 years? So
Yeah.
I love that. I love being part of an ever evolving organization that can kind of stop and think and say, advocacy is such a huge part of what we do as well. In addition to making these matches, we have to make sure that they have rights and access out in their communities when they go
Hmm.
to work and walk in the world. And that's an ever evolving landscape too. So what can the CEI do to lend its voice and to continue to advocate for the rights and access of its guide dog users and guide dog users all around the world for that matter, right?
Right. Right.
Look at technology and all the opportunities that technology brings to integrate with our work. So continuing to be innovative, and forward thinking in our vision and strategy is really part of my prioritization in my role.
That makes sense. And on one hand, I could see where people might think a 96-year-old institution, is there a level of tradition or kind of set in your own ways? But also, I mean, how would you actually survive for 96 years if you weren't willing to be innovative, if you weren't being creative about how to continue moving forward in the work that you're doing? I don't, as somebody that's only owned their own business now for 9.5 years, I feel like, especially in kind of a startup vibe, you're re-engineering things all the time. I think a little bit less so now that we've got some maturity under our belt and things. When you try to change things and implement things, it takes a lot longer because the ship is bigger and it takes
Right.
longer to, navigate that ship into a different direction, even if it's just a couple degrees difference. But I think you hit on something that's really important: the need to be innovation in all programming, especially if you want to, experience, that 100th year, which is right around the corner. That's
Exactly. Or
super exciting.
150, right? Just
Yeah.
looking forward. I think as we start talking about integrity and teamwork and how leadership can help with that change management and with attitudinally being excited and
Hmm.
optimistic about that instead of fearful or cautious or negative about that approach.
Hmm.
It's the make or break in any forward-looking vision, in my opinion and experiences,
Sure.
embracing it rather than fearing it. So
Yeah.
I really get excited about my role and developing relationships with this team that allow us to move forward. And it is based on tradition, and we're proud of that, right? We know
Yeah.
that 95% success rate that I mentioned is based on decades of experience.
Yeah.
And some of my colleagues have dedicated their entire professional career to to this
Wow.
work. And so part of being a new leader, a new CEO, is being thoughtful and listening and understanding and asking questions and respecting that tradition,
Yeah.
knowing what is sacrosanct and what is essential to our success, and what where we can grow and evolve and become more efficient and more effective. And
Hmm.
that's part of that collaborative teamwork process.
Sounds like you've learned a lot throughout your career, but as you mentioned, you are new to this position. You're about a year in. I'm curious, can you share with us how some of your past experiences have shaped how you lead today or how you think about leadership?
Oh, sure. I was thinking about this and prepping for our conversation because I've been so incredibly fortunate to have had really inspirational mentors. I am a
Mm.
huge proponent of mentorship because I've been the beneficiary of that with
Wow.
really inspired, empathetic, and purpose-driven leaders in my career. So I think each one of those experiences has contributed to my leadership style and toolkit, if you will,
Hmm.
and approach. They've all been different organizations. I'm not from this community. I'm not from the blind, low vision community, but the transferable skills of being caring about an individual's independence and dignity, about
Mm.
really looking at fundamental social service rights and what people should have for the quality of life that each and every one of us should be afforded
Hmm.
has driven my interest in the seeing eye and being in this role and bringing my authentic self and care to that purpose and joining this team has been a really really nice fit. Each of my experiences professionally, especially in the fundraising and donor stewardship realm of nonprofit, and volunteer management,
Hmm.
has really contributed to a teamwork approach. You need every single person contributing their essential role to success and collaboration. So that's, I think, all of those roads have led to this moment.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about team because I think I've only been a CEO of a company that I started from the ground up. So I kind of, hired all the people and everybody only knows me kind of at the helm. I would imagine teamwork is especially important in building that sense of team, even if the team was already there before you and you kind of moving into that role. It's something to be especially sensitive to and very mindful of. And I'm curious for you to share a little bit more about that because strong leadership, as we know, is certainly not doing it all yourself. And sometimes some of us have a hard time letting go of things and want to continue doing it ourselves. But it's about bringing the best out in others and tapping into their potential. So I'm curious how you develop that strong leadership and how you've been able to tap into the strengths of other people or continuing to um, um, let others that certainly in your case, you've mentioned some of your team members have been there their entire career. So kind of honoring their talents, skills, strengths, and the way that they've operated within this organization even before your time. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think uh, there's a famous quote, I don't know how famous to me at least, by
Mm.
Bob Iger, the former CEO chair of Disney, and he's like, "You're only as good as the excellence of the people and the quality of the product
Hmm.
that you surround yourself with." And
Sure.
I think that's really true. So I've walked into a place where there's a lot of excellence. So,
Mm.
and a lot of very highly honed skills, right? An
Mm.
extraordinary veterinary medicine team and a full-time geneticist on staff who is talking about the temperament and trainability of the
Mm.
dogs that will become the best possible guide dogs. And
Mhm.
all of the instructors and trainers here that are working with the dogs and with the students and graduates, everyone is highly specialized. So walking in the door right away, there's already from me an incredible level of respect given to their
Mm. Mhm.
to their roles and to their knowledge base of what they do. I wasn't hired to be them. I was hired to
Right.
facilitate their success and provide them whatever resources they need to be successful.
I
So
love
I'm in
that.
service of them. I feel very much part of the team,
Mm.
but I have a specific role as a leader, right, in terms of decision making. Um, the bar is set high, and and it should be, and I
Mhm.
should kind of continue to make sure there's clear communication of expectations from the staff, but also the other way, what I expect of them, but what the community, including the staff, the donors, the volunteers, can expect or want to expect from me, right?
Hmm.
So when expectations are really clear and all the oars of the boat row in the same direction,
Right.
it should be a smooth trip. When you find that there are people who are unhappy or aren't happy with change, or maybe aren't accustomed to change, just not familiar with how to process that.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's really on me to help educate and inspire and guide that gently, again, with the empathy, with the
Hmm.
understanding, asking a lot of questions, trying to break down the barriers to say what is causing your concern, the
Hmm.
what, the why, the asking questions, being a good listener,
Yeah.
to try and get people on the, rowing in the same direction. And then, just practically speaking, if there are people, um, and it's often really most difficult. And I think every CEO has experienced this, or every leader has experienced this at some point in their career. Um, it's hard when it's a star performer and someone excellent, or someone who has a
Yeah.
very tenure, and they're not willing to change, or they're,
Hmm.
even worse, perhaps obstructionist.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that has to be dealt with. You do
Right.
as much as you can. You make the best faith effort you can to get someone, on board and aligned with the direction the organization is going, and to be an essential collaborative part of the team. And if they can't,
Hmm.
then that has to change.
Hmm. I loved what you said just a moment ago about, I'm paraphrasing, but you said you weren't hired to be them. You weren't hired to be the experts to replace their tenure and expertise and experience, right? What your role is bringing them the resources they need in order to be successful in their role. And I love that because resources can mean so many things, right? It could be advocacy for the work. It could be removing roadblocks or misconceptions about the programming. It could be actual financial resources. It could be more people or the right people. To your point, if historically an organization has had oars rowing in different directions, we certainly know that's often the case. And a
Right.
new CEO has to come on board and get everybody in alignment. So I love your kind of summary and the picture that you're painting for what leadership might look like. And I think that's, I don't know, that really resonates with me because I can see that. I think oftentimes that I've seen in nonprofits, especially in situations where people kind of move up within an organization on the programmatic side, they do have that expertise on the programmatic side. And sometimes it's really hard to shift away from that and embrace some of those other elements of your role. Like you said, getting the resources, what does that mean? That can mean lots of different things, right? And probably in every single one of those um, examples of resources we need to get is going to put us outside of our comfort zone. And I know as somebody that is a CPA and did accounting for years, right? And I own an accounting firm now. Sometimes we want to fall back to the things that are that rooted us and got us into this work to begin with. But I love the idea of the kind of the blanket statement. What are those resources? As you're saying that, I'm kind of thinking of my own team and what does that look like? Is that new computers? Is that certain software? Is it more training? Is it more people? Is it
Professional development, right? And
yeah,
even if it's how to be, the online classes on LinkedIn, or how to be a
yeah,
better manager, or I want to learn Excel pivot tables, asking
right.
people what will continue to provide them
Yeah.
professional satisfaction and growth, but also benefit the organization and fill some of those gaps. I think you're right. I think it's really important.
Yeah, it's such a big thing to unpack. It could be in your perspective too, I'm sure, even like board relationships or the clients you serve, and sometimes parting ways with some of those partnerships if they're not
Right.
serving your team. There's lots of different barriers for your team to feel happy and successful, and I think about those things a lot.
In the broader service dog community, not just the seeing eye or guide dogs specifically, but there is a shortage of puppy raisers. Coming out of
Mm,
COVID, there has been a shortage of individuals and families that were willing to take on that essential first year of
mm,
raising a pup, and for to come back eventually for
mm,
training.
mhm,
And we've put a lot of time and effort at the Seeing Eye, as I know our other peer organizations have, into messaging that without those volunteers
mm,
providing that major gift of time and love and social exposure to those puppies, And without funders, again, resources,
Right.
two essential resources, there is no seeing eye. There is
Right.
no canine companions. There are no, service dogs that are so essential in this day and age for people. So, um, to your point about resources and being an ambassador to secure them, not just the dollars, which every nonprofit knows is essential,
Sure.
but the volunteerism and the right staff and the right partners for the work.
Right.
It really is. It's a key component of, I think, a successful CEO.
Yeah. And I love just that obvious barrier that you have the communication of what those barriers are. Like, look, we need families to do this, which I actually didn't know that was a thing until recently. I saw a documentary somewhere or another. I was
Yes,
watching a
Netflix.
documentary. Um, do you know what I'm referring to? I don't know off the top
Yeah,
of my head. I just
there's
kind
a
of stumbled
Netflix
across it.
special about
Yeah. That
about
kind of talked about that. I'm like, wait, that's a thing. Like parents taking puppies, I say
and I am
parents,
gonna, I'm gonna, for your viewers, I am just gonna put up a small little plug-in. Apologies, Tasha, but
No,
like
please do.
there's a puppy raisers section on the Seeing Eye website, or
Okay.
we're not close to your listenership, and any local service dog organization will have information on how to get involved. And it's one of the biggest gifts, an individual or a family
Hmm.
can make, is to show that pup love, provide that socialization and house manners, and then um, give it back to someone who needs it, right? Our volunteers
Yeah.
say, I may want this dog, but someone needs this dog. And it's like an extended foster situation that
Yeah.
yields someone the gift of independence and dignity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, I didn't realize as we'll get back on topic, guys. Don't worry. But no, I love that.
Right.
I love that we're going off on this because some people kind of fall off mid-episode or whatever. But I think this is really important to the work that you're doing and something that I realized was a real challenge for this particular community for any sort of therapy dogs, right? And I
Right.
didn't realize this was a thing. I was mentioning to Karen offline. I got a puppy and he's now a year old, but I didn't realize that the training doesn't really begin. Therapy training in that way doesn't begin until like post 1 year. I mean, yes, there's some
Yeah.
like you got to be good manners. You got to,
Right.
we got to keep
Learn
some
you
boundaries
learn
on
the
these
basics,
puppies.
right?
But
Learn the basics. But
it's really cool, and I didn't realize that there are families needed out there for that problem. So thank you for bringing awareness to that. So anybody interested in long-term foster puppying, check out the Seeing Eye website. And then to your point, Karen, if it doesn't make sense in the geographic area, there are other therapy organizations all over the country for dogs
absolutely.
that need the same solution for families to take these pups in. So, okay, let's talk about integrity. Back to what we
Yes.
were saying. It's so hard to shift away from talking about puppies, but let's talk about something else that I think that I've experienced in my personal career. We talk about integrity and in our like financial blueprint and in the way that we do our work. We come in, we try to help support nonprofit organizations by way of their financial management, and sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's really bad. And
So
usually when it's really bad, it's usually like it's been a series of unfortunate things that have happened, maybe lots of turnover at the senior leadership level, maybe at the financial staff level, whatever it might be, right? And we often talk about integrity and setting the tone at the top, and really how without that integrity at the top of the organization, everything else seems to kind of fall apart. And I
mm,
know that you're a big believer in integrity. So I'm curious, as a nonprofit leader yourself, how do you encourage integrity among your team? And maybe how do you try to role model that to set the standard?
uh, it's a great question. And honestly, integrity is a word that means different things to different people, right?
Hmm.
So I'll define what it means to me. And I really um, think my ultimate goal as a leader is to encourage, again, a culture that everyone behaves and is integrity, not only for the organization but for themselves as human
Hmm.
beings, right? Like the
Hmm.
first the most important thing is to be in integrity with yourself. And what that means to me is like mean what you say and do what you say, and live a clear, transparent, and authentic life, and
Yeah.
let that flow into your work. So there only is one Karen. It's not a different
Hmm.
Karen behind closed doors. It's not a different Karen to the board versus a staff versus a donor. It's just one Karen. And
Hmm.
that leadership style and that authenticity should transfer over regardless. And hopefully that builds trust, that
Hmm.
if I say something, then I'm actually going to follow through and do it. Because I
Yeah.
think where a lot of leadership in my past experience and where I've heard others fall down is they might say something, they might not follow up in a timely fashion. They might not communicate clearly, so people are unclear.
Yeah.
Someone says something, and then there's just the vacuum. It goes into, the cone of silence, or and so a lot of integrity is just follow through and common courtesy of communication.
Hmm.
But I do believe that it goes back again to those um, clear communications of expectations, that
Hmm.
what I expect of myself in terms of a bar being high and quality of a small task or a big task. And I'm not talking about perfection, because I don't, I think perfection is
Yeah.
a really tough nut, and some people get
Right.
hung up on, it's the what is that expression, the perfection's good is the of evil,
Y-
or what, what it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but basically perfection can be really tricky wicket, and people get
Hmm.
too hung up on it. And I'm not talking about high quality being perfection, but
Hmm.
in small ways and in larger monumental initiatives, the quality bar should be high, and you should be integrity with yourself. If you say this is the process and the path we're going to take, then you role model that by marching down that path first.
Hmm.
You're
Hmm.
leading at the front of the pack with that and rolling up your sleeves. And I feel that accessibility to me as a CEO is very, very important.
Hmm.
So I, and I've had for 20 years this expression that a for-profit CEO, Andy Grove, actually the founder of Intel, had said to me at in one of my roles, that it's all about micro information, not micromanagement, right?
Mm.
So
What's that mean? I'm
it
curious.
means that you want the information at the smallest detail. You want to be walking
Mm.
to my beautiful campus in the back of me. I want to walk around, and I want to see the people on my facilities team who are planting those flowers and taking care of the trees, and understand their work and understand what challenges they're
Hmm.
having. But I don't want to go plant their plants,
Right. Right. Or tell them move this
Right,
here and that. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can move that over to 5-year financial forecasting or
Mm.
data analysis, right? Like you want the information, but you don't want to micromanage the leaders who or the staff that are in charge of the process.
I love
So
that. Yeah.
being a highly engaged, not behind closed doors leader, having people know that when you say something, you will follow through on it, just lending authenticity um, to a relationship and to a
Hmm.
trust level that encourages collaboration and teamwork. Integrity and
Sure.
teamwork are so closely aligned, hand in glove, in my opinion, because I don't think you can have the teamwork without a clear communal understanding of what integrity is and means for the organization and for yourself.
Yeah. I'll say, this is me asking for myself. I will say asking for a friend. One of the things I know that I've struggled with with respect to integrity and the definition of having one true self, right? And
Mhm.
I love that concept because I feel like in other roles, I've had to play the role of the job, not necessarily who Tasha is in that role, right? And that's one of the things that I love about my work life now, that I feel like, being the helm of things, I can kind of choose how I want to show up. And it's
Mhm.
been a bit of a learning experience for me, somehow finding your authenticity while also recognizing that the heaviness that you experience and the decisions that you make, or the decisions that you're pondering making, or just things that you're privy to in your role. And sometimes you're not quite ready to share that with your team, not out of lack of transparency. It's like, we're just trying to figure this thing out. And
It's
I
not
used,
appropriate time, right? It's not the right
yeah. And
time.
it's like,
Yeah,
I want to be transparent, but I realized kind of early on, there's a time and a place for transparency. And it's not um, it's
absolutely.
intended to manage the emotions, because I also recognize that when people see me, this is a bad analogy, it kind of reminds me, I have a young parent or a young child. And, when people look at the leader or their parent or, someone in that sort of authority role, and they're hysterical or they're
Mhm.
uncertain or they're
That's
whatever,
the
then
tone,
that
right?
that sets
Yeah.
the tone, right? And sometimes I've had to remind my team or even just myself when can I be transparent? When can I be vulnerable? But also, when do I need to keep it together?
Right.
So, so that people feel a sense of security, as
That's
especially during change management and some of these things. And I'm curious if you struggle with that too. I definitely think I found a more comfortable place, but early on, it's like we're going to be transparent, we're going to share everything, and then I would share things, and I realized these folks do not.
it's not ready for prime time, right?
Yeah,
It's
and it's
not
maybe not
ready.
appropriate for them to
Right.
hear every grievance of everything in the company.
Right.
I think that's a fine balance that
Yeah.
I'm continuing to refine.
I agree. I think that comes with time and experience too,
Yeah,
right? But you definitely have a few faux pas along the way of that learning experience,
yeah,
and still you still do, right? I still do. I
right.
think, okay, we're ready to share this with the whole staff, and then the questions that come back lead me to believe that maybe there wasn't enough thought. We weren't
Yeah,
quite there. But then again, I just kind of take that in stride and say, okay, well, those questions are really great and they're informing the
yeah,
next iteration of this. And
yeah.
we'll get back to you. I think, again, if the intention, let's just talk about a new policy or a new performance evaluation
Hmm.
process or something new to the whole organization, that you spend the thoughtfulness behind closed doors, gathering points of view, gathering information, talking to your leaders, really listening and capturing that information to inform the new policy or the
Hmm.
new process. And then you present it like, okay, we're good to go and ready. And then you realize, oh, maybe we weren't quite there with the thinking. We didn't get everything we needed. Then
Hmm.
it's okay to say, like, this has been invaluable additional feedback. Here's the 2.0 version. We're human
Right,
beings. We're not
right,
perfect. I
right.
think to your point about inspiring calm and making sure people know that you can be um, count on in times of stress or crisis or under pressure, and hold it together, be that kind of leader. I think that's really important to
Yeah,
avoid drama and hysteria and just have a grounding force.
yeah.
But I think if people again build a relationship of trust and understand the type of style that you bring. I mean, my
Hmm.
leadership style is much different than my successors, and then the one
Right.
before that, right? So as they learn me and understand that they can trust that, oh, well, I'm allowed to express my opinion that I don't think this is quite right just yet. And I'm
Yeah,
actually encouraged to express my opinion that this may not work for my team because it doesn't address XYZ.
sure.
And Karen will listen and she'll iterate, or she'll explain why not and why it is the way it is, and we need to move forward and make it work, right? So
Yeah,
I don't know if that answers your question, but I do feel like it's not a fixed thing. It's an ongoing process. And the
yeah,
more I do it and the more confident and just the more I feel that this is a really nice alignment of skills and my background and organizational mission, and my heart's in the right place. And,
yeah,
then it just feels more natural for me to keep expressing and being more transparent around my actions as a leader.
yeah, yeah. I love that. That's what I say with these episodes. Sometimes we may not be able to come out with the answer, but at least we'll get some validation along the way. Like, yes, we
Yeah,
all struggle with that at different times, and it's definitely an ever-changing and evolving and self-reflection thing that since starting this company, we've grown substantially. We've weathered through a pandemic shortly after I started hiring a bunch of people, and a lot of volatility now in the federal funding. I mean, there's just always curveballs thrown at us, right, in the nonprofit community. So,
you're
it's
providing such an essential service for nonprofits because,
yeah.
again, the resources and the stability and the grounding and compliance and all of the issues that maybe people coming up from the program side or from different
Mhm.
backgrounds may not have that expertise. It's so important because it's foundational to success,
Right,
right?
right, right.
So
Well, and I can imagine in your work too, right? How do you all keep calm and composure when you're working with families that desperately need their, support dogs, and maybe it's not on the timeline, or things don't quite work out, or something happens. I mean, these are things that you're doing are very important, and probably
well,
there's a lot of emotion around trying to get solutions for the folks that
there
need the dogs that you need. So, I think we're all in some ways in this. boat together because the people we serve in more cases than not, especially in my space of nonprofit, is around like a lot of social service agencies and things. So you're dealing with people that are in crisis.
Yeah.
And I think it's even more important for us that are in leadership roles while we're operating in a world of crisis all the time to continue to try to keep calm and our own composure. And that's tricky. That's sometimes hard to do.
It also goes back to my point about empathy in a way,
Hmm.
right? You said, if people are highly emotional and you can stay calm and empathetic and be a listener and hear them and acknowledge whatever's going on and try and
Hmm.
shepherd them through and provide solutions, but also not in a cold, dismissive way, but in an
Right.
empathetic place from coming from care. It
Right.
does a lot to calm everyone down. And we do
Yeah.
have um, a lot of people go blind. They aren't born blind, but they go blind
Hmm.
over time for whatever condition they may have. So we have people coming here who have lived a sighted life and now are
Mm.
grappling with a transition and further losing sight and preparing for that. And it's a highly vulnerable situation, right?
Hmm.
Learning a new skill, which is, the instructors always say here that if it was easy, we would ship the dog to you. It's not
Right.
to learn how to partner with this highly trained dog and to build that bond. But, people have to become, our students and people here have to become very vulnerable, and they have to also become very
Hmm.
attuned to supporting that in the and and giving giving compassion and guidance and support to the people we serve.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Karen, I'd love to talk about this all day long, and especially weaving in conversations about the pups and how they are transforming lives. That's so cool. I do want to leave with maybe one last question for you. It's kind of a, kind of wrapping it all up. If there's one piece of advice that you might give to a nonprofit leader stepping into leadership today, maybe for the first time, and it speaks to that concept of strong leadership, what advice would you give?
Um, in
I'm putting
addition
you
to
on the spot.
no, no, no. In addition to being true to yourself, I would find a strong mentor. I would find a
Mm,
mentor or a coach that you really align with who can serve as a sounding board and a guide. I mean, they always every one of my mentors told me that being a CEO is kind of a lonely place.
yeah.
I haven't found it to be that lonely. I've found it to be where I seek out counsel, whether it's from my
Hmm.
board or from other experts or from my own coach. I just think it's important to have someone to help guide at any age and stage of your career, and
Hmm.
then also start providing that more to others
Yeah.
along the way. And the concept of mentorship, I think, as a CEO and leader, feeds the integrity, it feeds the teamwork, it feeds the culture that you want to continue to build and leave the imprint on for the organization. So I'd
Hmm.
highly encourage both mentoring and being mentored at any point in your career.
I love your clarification of mentorship because I think a lot of times we think of like a formal mentorship, but I completely agree. I don't know if I have a formal specific mentor in that way. But I love what you described as having counsel somewhere, whether it's fellow executive directors or CEOs, whether, like you said, it's your board, if that's a great relationship there, or some other community where you can just have counsel because you're absolutely right. It does feel isolating in some ways being in that role because there's a lot of things you're grappling with, as we talked about earlier, that maybe are not ready quite for discussion, even with your leadership team or other individuals within the organization in that way, and have a sounding board. And I love the way that you kind of, I don't know, maybe that's not what you were saying, but as I thought
No,
about
it's
mentorship, I'm like,
absolutely.
that's actually more
No,
like what
it's
my mentorship
absolutely
looks like.
what it's absolutely what I was saying too, because I also think a lot of nonprofits feel that they maybe don't have the resources to dedicate to that, and you don't need to pay. It's lovely if you can, but you don't need to. I just called a donor to introduce myself a couple months ago, and in the course of the conversation, we were talking about going into a strategic planning process for the
Mhm.
organization in the next years, and he was the retired CEO of a major food and beverage uh, company. And he's like, well, I'm going to help you with this and call me back in 2 months when you have it framed out and we'll go back and forth on it. And
Oh,
just a,
great.
just an invitation from such an established, executive that
Yeah.
that I'll definitely avail myself of.
Right.
So so I think continuing to seek out and be curious and be open to that while at the same time providing it to the next generations um, is really a priority.
I love that. Yeah. Well, Karen, those that are listening, if they want to follow along in your leadership journey or hear more about the organization Seeing Eye, what would be the best way to connect or follow along?
Oh, thanks, Tasha. LinkedIn is terrific. I'm on LinkedIn, the Seeing
Okay.
Eye on LinkedIn, the Seeing Eye website, seeingeye.org is a great place for more information,
Okay.
but really appreciate any anyone who wants to DM me through LinkedIn. I'm happy to respond and provide more information of any kind.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Karen, for your time. I know that's really valuable. And I mentioned this concept for those of you that have not heard it before, like the 30 principles that we've put together of like really successful organizations. We talk a lot about the non-financial stuff, like leadership that we talked about today. I'm going to put a link in the show notes on that if you want to download that and see what, like I said, the common threads that I've at least witnessed in my, I don't know, 20-ish years of working in the nonprofit space. Go ahead and do that. And of course, a shameless plug, as I always do, if you found this conversation interesting or insightful, please engage with it in some way. That's how the meta world makes it searchable for other people in the nonprofit space, maybe struggling with some of the same issues. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time.